Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's Reviews, and welcome to my 10 least favorite episodes of Star Trek Enterprise. So I'm doing my least favorite list this week, and then next week I will release my 20 favorite episodes of Enterprise. And then I will be done with all 5 of the Legacy Star Trek series, not counting the animated series because it doesn't count. So if you haven't already, please go and check out my least favorite and favorite videos for all the other 4 Legacy shows. So I did try to frame it as least favorite rather than worst to emphasize the fact that it is my opinion. It is subjective. But in that, it was really hard to come up with only 10 that are my least favorite because there are a lot of episodes that I did not like, that I had a hard time sitting through in Enterprise, especially in the first 2 seasons. In fact, the first 2 seasons will dominate this list, with season 2 especially dominating the list, taking up 4 out of the top 6, including the top 2, will be from season 2, one of the worst seasons in Star Trek history, in my opinion. So I did decide, though, to spread the love and have representation from all 4 seasons of Enterprise. So there is 1 episode each from seasons 3 and 4. The season 3 one, you will see it very shortly at my number 10, because it's kind of the token season 3 episode. I very easily could have put in a season 1 or 2 episode above it, but as I said, there's like a whole bunch of episodes I very easily could have put in here, so why not go ahead and put that one in rather than another one, just so I can have all 4 of the seasons represented. And then as for my season 4 episode, it is very, very firmly entrenched into my 10 least favorite list. It is a little higher up on the list. It is one that I hate as much as season 1 and 2 episodes. And if you have not watched my channel before, you might have a wrong idea of what that is. It is not These Are the Voyages. I don't hate These Are the Voyages. I have a lot of empathy for Brendan Braga and the writers of Enterprise being canceled all of a sudden and having to cobble together this finale. They always wanted to end with the birth of the Federation, so they had to do the time jump, and they thought the best way to do that was to do the Riker thing, and it didn't work. It is not a good episode, don't get me wrong. I don't think it's a good episode, but I feel for them because if they had been given 7 seasons like the other shows, then they would have come up with a much better finale that would have presented the birth of the Federation. So I kind of feel bad for them. And also my experience of watching it is not thoroughly unpleasant the way that it is watching these 10 episodes, plus other ones that I didn't even get a chance to mention. There are a lot of episodes in Enterprise that I just had a really, really hard time sitting through. So that's what we're going to focus on here, and it does not include These Are the Voyages. So let us go ahead and jump into what is on my 10 least favorite Enterprise list, starting with my number 10. Number 10! At number 10, Exile from Season 3. So this is that token Season 3 episode I mentioned before. And as I mentioned before, I could have put any number of season 1 or season 2 episodes in this spot, but I wanted to have all the seasons represented, so I put this one on. But you know what? It deserves to be here because I really, really do not like this episode. This is the episode that I call the Beauty and the Beast episode because the Beauty and the Beast imagery here is so over the top. I mean, they go to this big, scary castle from medieval times. He's got the candles lit everywhere. It's dark. I'm pretty sure there was probably a storm going on in the background, if I recall correctly. There's a fireplace. And he's wearing the robe. He is wearing the freaking Beauty and the Beast robe. This is so over the top. Like, I cannot believe that I was actually expected to take this episode seriously. It is so ridiculous. Also, Captain Archer is the most irresponsible captain in Starfleet history in this episode because he flies away from the planet, takes the Enterprise, the whole Enterprise, far, far away for a week and leaves behind his good friend and important communications officer, Hoshi Sato, leaves her behind with this obvious creep. Any moron can look at him, and it is so obvious that he is going to do something bad to her. It is the most obvious thing in the world, and Archer should lose his commission for leaving her behind with this creep. And at one point, Archer even says, well, I don't trust this guy. And then Hoshi's like, oh, no, it's fine. I'll be fine here. And then Archer's like, oh, well, okay, well, if you'll be fine, then that changes everything. I'll just fly away for 7 days and leave you behind here with this creep. No, but of course he does that so the episode can happen. And thus, this equates to contrived writing. Contrived writing is any time one of our characters makes a completely unreasonable decision that no reasonable human being would ever actually make in real life, but they have to make that decision so the episode can happen. That is contrived writing. That is why I don't like this episode, and that is why it is worthy of being number 10 on my list.
Number 9.
At number 9, Horizon from Season 2. Horizon is one of 2 Enterprise episodes that directly rip off the 4th season Next Generation episode, Family. The other one is the 4th season Enterprise episode, Home. And although I don't love Home either, it doesn't make my list here because at least with Home, it leaves the interesting parts of Family intact, which is the trauma caused to our captain character by recent events in the show. Whereas in Horizon, it's as if they take a big giant straw and just suck out everything that made Family interesting. The trauma caused to our characters, the good acting, the good characters, all gone. In Family, we had the great Patrick Stewart playing one of the most interesting characters in Star Trek history, Jean-Luc Picard, and here he is replaced in the same exact plot by Travis Mayweather, one of the least interesting and the least developed character in any of the main cast of any of the Star Trek shows. Travis Mayweather, a cardboard cutout of a character. I don't know what that says about Enterprise, that the one token black guy is the least developed character, but we don't need to get into that. The point is, it's the same plot. We have a main character going back home again. His brother is really pissed off because they abandoned the family to be a big Starfleet man, and their father has just recently died, and the brother has all the weight on his shoulders to take on the family business, and he's mad about that. But in the end, they get in a fight and they make up and everything's all hunky-dory. It's the same plot. It is difficult to watch a story that I already saw with the great Patrick Stewart and Jean-Luc Picard, a very developed character, with this very underdeveloped Travis Mayweather character. I kept having to pause it over and over again because it was hard to sit through, and that is why Horizon is number 9 on my least favorite episode list.
8 ball and quarter pocket, baby.
At number 8, Acquisition from Season 1. So this episode actually has an all-star cast in Star Trek terms. It has a who's who of Star Trek guest actors. It has Jeffrey Combs, it has Clint Howard, and it has Ethan Phillips, who actually played a main character in Star Trek Voyager. So you would think that that would be a good episode. The problem? It's the Ferengi in an Enterprise episode where they absolutely do not belong. They were crammed in here for fan service. It made absolutely no sense for them to be here. And not to mention, I typically don't like Ferengi episodes anyway. They tend to be silly. They tend to go for humor, but not land the jokes, and this was one of the worst in that the jokes were so bad and the plot was so cliche. So we have Archer convincing the dumb henchman to turn on his boss. Like, how many cartoons have I seen that plot in? I can't even keep track of it. It is so dumb. This episode is dumb with a capital D. I feel like after watching it, I lost a couple points off of my IQ score just from watching this episode. So it is not one of my favorite. It is in fact number 8 on my least favorite episode list. At number 7, Shuttle Pod 1 from Season 1. So this episode was especially difficult for me to sit through. So first of all, there are no stakes. So in the beginning of the episode, Reed and Tucker are in a shuttlecraft and they believe that the Enterprise has been destroyed. Of course, we, the audience, see the Enterprise the very next scene, and Archer and Hoshi and T'Pol and everyone are perfectly alive and well. Now, if they hadn't shown us that, of course we would know they're not going to destroy the Enterprise this early on in the series. Of course, it's still around. However, it really pulls the rug out from under the stakes when we have two characters who believe the Enterprise has been destroyed and are acting as if the Enterprise has been destroyed, and yet we are watching in the other scenes the Enterprise perfectly not being destroyed. It just makes them look like a couple of morons. And that is what I felt like I was watching, like a Dumb and Dumber, the episode. Like, they're just a couple of morons, and of course the episode has to slip in the standard over-sexualization that Enterprise was often engaging in the first 2 seasons. Having Reed talk about T'Pol's butt, that was just dumb, and it's not something that had ever come up before or come up much after. It was just there because, you know, sex. And this was just difficult for me to sit through because they have no chemistry and it's so uninteresting. It was a very, very boring episode, and that is why it is number 7 on my list of least favorite Enterprise episodes.
Number 6.
At number 6, Singularity from Season 2. So this episode has a lot of characteristics of episodes that I hate. So first of all, it's a virus episode, and I have talked at length on this channel before, or my previous channel, Acton Tomko's Reviews, about how I am so sick and tired of the virus trope. It is so overdone. It's the same thing over and over. But another characteristic this episode has that I hate from other Star Trek episodes is anything where the characters are made to act out of character, or they get some kind of virus that makes them behave in some crazy way. I really can't stand those episodes, especially when the acting sucks, which I thought was the case here. And the concept behind this was just flat out stupid. So this is the one, if you don't remember, it's the one where everybody gets obsessed on one thing, and Archer's obsessed on writing this speech, Trip is obsessed on building this chair, and it is just really, really bad. This episode is also noted for inventing the red alert, and it has one of the worst puns in Star Trek history, where they at first want to call it the Reed alert. Get it? Lieutenant Reed invented it? Ha ha ha! The Reed alert. So this is dumb for several reasons, not the least of which I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't already have a system like this in place before ever leaving space dock. And they play it off like, oh, well, we didn't know there was going to be any hostile aliens out there. Seriously, the Vulcans would not have mentioned that. The Vulcans didn't even want them to leave space dock. So one of the first things they would have said is, you guys are not ready to face all of the hostile species out there. So the Enterprise, to prove the Vulcans wrong, would have definitely installed some kind of tactical alert system, which is what they end up calling it instead of red alert here. They would have installed that long before they left Space Dock, so I do not even buy this as an origin story, and it is prequelitis at its worst because it's an origin story we did not need. Not to mention all the other things I already said about the bad virus trope, and the bad trope where everybody behaves funny. So this is quite easily number 6 on my list of least favorite Enterprise episodes.
Number 5 is very much alive.
At number 5, A Vanishing Point from Season 2. Now this, like the episode before it on my list, Singularity, comes from a particular part of about mid-season 2 where there were several episodes in a row that were god-awful, one after the other after the other. I call it the stretch of doom. It was a stretch of episodes that was very hard to get through and also includes number 1 and number 2 on my list. But as far as this one, number 5, Vanishing Point. So this episode is a complete knockoff of a Next Generation episode called Realm of Fear, which featured Lieutenant Reginald Barclay as the main character. And I didn't even think that episode was very good to begin with, but at least in that episode, the stakes were real, whereas this one is all in Hoshi's head. And here is actually my biggest beef with this episode. So it is pretty obvious that it's all in Hoshi's head. In fact, the episode really goes out of its way to make sure that it is abundantly clear that all of this is in Hoshi's head. Like the scene where Hoshi is unable to translate this alien language, but some random crewman with no skill is able to do it, and it makes her look bad. Obviously, that is playing into her own fears. It is obviously not something that would actually happen. It is obviously in her head. There's another scene later where they think she's quote-unquote dead, and Tucker is saying all of these mean things about her that he absolutely would never say. So the episode just went out of its way to make it clear that it's in her head, and yet they still try to play it off like it's some big twist that we're supposed to be shocked by. Like, ha! It was in her head all along. And like, yeah, I know, you made that pretty clear already. So it is just really bad as a twist, probably one of the worst in Star Trek. And that is why Vanishing Point is number 5 on my list of least favorite Star Trek Enterprise episodes.
The not so fantastic number 4.
At number 4, Bound from Season 4. So this is the one Season 4 episode that I did include on this list, and it's all the way up at number 4 because I do consider it as bad as a lot of those Season 1 and Season 2 episodes. This was the prequel episode we did not need. This was supposed to be explaining the origins of the Orion sex slaves from the original series, except, ooh, here's the twist. It's actually the men who are the slaves. Ooh. So this was clearly trying to be presented as if it were a feminist episode, but it was clearly written by men who don't actually understand what feminism is. So the point of feminism, just as within any movement, the same thing with me as a trans person, when I speak out in favor of other trans people, I am never saying that I want trans people to dominate cis people and control them. And no true feminist is trying to say that they wish to control all men with their sexual prowess. That's not what feminism is about. We just want to be, I don't know, treated like human beings, which is actually exactly the opposite of what is happening in this episode, where the women are still treated like sex objects. And it features the man's worst nightmare. It goes all the way back to the siren stories where, you know, the sirens would call the men into the sea with their songs because they were such beautiful, sexy women. That is like the man's biggest fear is what this episode is. It actually doesn't make it okay for the men to be the slaves. How about this concept? How about slavery is bad? No matter who the slavers and the slaves are, it's bad. So So is this episode. Also, very, very bad, and one that I never hope to have to sit through ever again.
Number 5. Number 3, sir. Number 3.
At number 3, Unexpected from season 1. So the entire premise of this episode can be summarized like this. A man got pregnant. Did you see that? A man got pregnant. He's a man. They're not supposed to get pregnant. Isn't that funny? That's the whole point of this episode. And they put all of their eggs in that basket. They sacrifice plot. They sacrifice anything that makes any sense. They sacrifice any real characterization. And they sacrifice conflict. There's not any real conflict in this episode. I would have expected that these aliens would be up to no good, but they're like, no, they're nice guys. So the conflict is supposed to come from the Klingons, who are a joke in this episode. There's no real conflict. There's no real plot. And a holodeck. Let's just throw in a holodeck because we really miss having holodecks in the Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager. And oh shit, we accidentally made a series that was taking place before there were holodecks. So let's just throw one in here for no reason. Like, it really didn't need to be a part of the plot at all. So again, the whole point of this, a man is pregnant, and don't even get me started on why that is so problematic. I understand this is the early 2000s. They didn't quite have the understanding of gender, at least not in mainstream television, that we do now, but still, it is very cringe to watch, and that is why it is number 3 on my list of least favorite Star Trek Enterprise episodes.
There's 2 of them. Number 2.
At number 2, Precious Cargo, from that infamous stretch of doom in the middle of season 2. So I really hate thinking about this episode. Do I have to talk about it? Isn't it self-explanatory why this is bad? Yeah, okay, so let's move on to number 1 now. Alright, fine. I will talk about it a little bit. So this is a god-awful attempt at a romantic comedy using all of the tired old cliches that you can possibly think of with bad actors. Okay, so Connor Trinneer, he's fine, I guess, but the woman that they got to play the female lead in this episode is awful, and it turns out she's not actually an actor. I guess she was famous for some reality show, some like chef contest or something, and it shows because she is so bad, and it sinks an already bad episode with a cliche plot of you've got the pirate falling in love with the beautiful rich woman, and they come from 2 different worlds, but hey, they're gonna fall in love, except that there is no chemistry. This was so painful. Please don't make me talk about this episode anymore. Let me move on to one that is even worse than this, and that is my number 1 least favorite episode.
Here we are, my number 1 least favorite episode.
And my number 1 least favorite episode of Star Trek Enterprise is A Night in Sickbay, from that same stretch of doom in the 2nd season. So not only is this one of my least favorite episodes of Enterprise, but it is absolutely one of the worst episodes in all of Star Trek. If I ever sat down to do a 10 worst episodes in Star Trek list, pretty sure this would probably crack the top 5. And that is saying a lot. So it's almost actually impressive how many different ways this episode manages to suck. Like, how did they manage to come up with an episode that just sucks on so many different levels? I don't even know where to begin with this episode, so I guess I'll start with the antagonist. I guess they're the antagonist. It's that species that they brought back from season 1. Remember, they were in that episode where they got all offended because the Enterprise crew was eating in front of them. So now they're getting offended for Porthos peeing, which they probably should be offended for that. But the point is, it is a one-off joke. It is not funny to bring these guys back. They weren't even that funny to begin with. Like, it was a one-off joke. They should not have brought that species back. And the humor all throughout this is cringe. I felt so bad for Scott Bakula that they made him wear that ridiculous outfit at the end of the episode. And you could tell the writers were like, nailed it! Like, they thought they had comedy gold, but this was the worst possible type of humor that you could ever imagine, and it was that way all throughout the episode, including like Phlox trying to brush his tongue to keep Archer up, like the worst of the worst sitcom tropes. It is so bad, and they have this thin veil of an excuse to have Archer in sickbay all night so that the episode could happen by saying that Porthos is in danger, except we're only going to mention Porthos like every 10 minutes or so, and the rest of the time we're not even going to remember that he exists, so that we can have this god-awful plot of Archer in sickbay. And I haven't even gotten to the worst of it yet. The worst of it is that over-sexualization that I mentioned earlier that often took place in seasons 1 and 2. This is the ugliest, most disgusting example of it, because you have this sexual tension between Archer and T'Pol that appears out of absolute nowhere. There was no build up to that before this episode, and it doesn't appear after this episode. And the reason why I find this so disgusting is that the premise is, well, you know, obviously any men and women who work together are going to have sexual tension. I mean, duh. If you're a co-worker and you're of the opposite gender, then sexual tension is inevitable. And it was so awful, and the episode really digs into that premise, and I just can't handle it. It's too much. It is one of the absolute worst episodes in the Star Trek franchise, and it is my number 1 least favorite episode of Star Trek Enterprise.
All right, thank you so much for watching my least favorite Enterprise episode list. Next week, I will get a lot more positive and I'll get into my 20 favorite episodes of Enterprise. So please make sure that you are subscribed if you have not already done so, and I will see you really soon. Goodbye.